As you know, I'm always looking for new ghost stories, and you can tell your ghost story to me in person if you book at the Phantom History House Bed and Breakfast. Go to phantomhistoryhouse.com, check out our 4 themed rooms, and book, and we will talk very soon. Hey everybody, Steve here at Phantom History House, actually back on the back lanai of Phantom History House, and I am chatting with Orion Michael, who I met recently at a psychic fair up in Dunnellon. How are you doing, Orion?
Fantastic.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Before we dive into the historic Dunnellon Train Depot, which is the episode I really want to, or the location I really want to focus on in this episode, tell me a little bit about your background and how you're involved in paranormal investigations.
I've always, and I mean always, have had a knack for ghost hunting long before I was even doing tarot or anything like that. I got a nice little $40 jazz camera from Walmart and was walking around my buddy's house looking for ghosts, of which we did find, by the way. That's a fun story. I got a digital recorder and eventually started ordering actual paranormal gear many years later. But I think we were 9 and 10 walking around his house with gear, freaked out looking for ghosts. And we did find them. I recall there's a couple EVPs that I recall that we did find. Some of them are funny,
Uh,
but we did manage to find ghosts at like 10 years old.
and was this here
In
in
middle
Florida that
school.
you did this?
Yeah, it was in my hometown. At his house is my town, Lehigh Acres, and
Okay.
we always had a hunch that his house was haunted, and yeah, we were right.
Well, you talked about, this was before tarot and things like that, and you also are a psychic medium. Is that the right term to use?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's more than just that. I've got a lot of skills in a lot of things, but psychic medium, I guess there's more of a stereotype to the term psychic medium. Most people think of a psychic medium, they think of the Long Island medium, that,
Mhm.
oh, they can just go in somewhere and talk to ghosts. Now, it doesn't always work like that. Mediumship in general could be a tarot reader, could be someone using crystal bowls, could be like the Long Island medium, could be a paranormal investigator. That's a big envelope for the word mediumship.
It is. The
So,
spectrum is very wide when it comes to that. And I know everybody has their own unique, like you said, talents and own unique ways of using those talents in order to investigate. So if I were to ask you, not the day job, but if I were to ask you, so what are you? How would you identify yourself?
to be honest, I would probably just characterize myself as somebody who was placed on this earth to help and use the skills that were given to me, my mediumship skills, my tarot, just my overall knowledge of people to help. I mean, I guess I could classify myself as a psychic medium, but there's a long laundry list of words that relate to me that I would probably spend the entire podcast listing. Not calling myself the overall emperor or anything like that, but I don't think I can be characterized in one item, just like nobody else can. We're all very unique and very widespread in this whole thing we do.
Right,
So,
absolutely. I mean, again, the paranormal spectrum itself is very, very broad. And the
mhm.
when it comes to past lives, current lives, ghosts, even that is very broad underneath this broader umbrella. So I like that you said that because you're really not kind of pigeonholed to one thing. Now, I always have to ask this whenever I talk to somebody who says anything close to saying that they're psychic or medium. Are you able to see ghosts? Do you sense ghosts? What is that like for you? And when did you first notice that you had this ability?
Oh boy. Okay, that's the two-part question. Let me go into the
Yes, it
first one.
is.
So, ever since I was born, my grandmother, who named me Orion after the constellation, always knew I would be special in that sorts, very powerful, as she likes to call it. And I've kind of always known that I've had that sort of connection. She's always described that us as humans, when we're born, there's a scale of 1 to 10 of how connected you are from the beginning. And most people never know they have psychic abilities because everyone does have that connection. But some never know. Some might get a glimpse at it, and some know immediately. And most people, from my understanding, start between a 1 and a 3. They don't really know. Some people start at between a 4 and a 5. I believe I started at around a 5, and obviously I've gone up a few numbers since then, but I'm never gonna. I'll probably get to 10, well, right before I finally pass. But
That's what I was going
I'm
to ask, was the scale to 10, and it sounds like it is.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Like my grandmother, I think she's finally reached 10. She's like, man, she's
Yeah.
something. But I strive to be, like her and do amazing things that she does every day. And I'm doing it my own way, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And I've,
hopefully that
of course,
answers
had a
most of
chance
the
to meet
question.
your grandmother, and she's fantastic and
Oh,
incredibly
I love
impressive,
it
as you say.
very
So
much so.
I'm
So
thankful to
the
her for creating an event where we were able to meet. So yeah, for the
oh,
second
yeah.
part of that question, when did you first
So
realize that you had this
so
intelligence?
I'm gonna tell a very fun story. So in my hometown of Lehigh Acres, Florida, it was my parents had purchased a house, they built a house. We moved out of that during the recession and we moved into a house to rent. Well, that house, long story short, we did find that there's an airport, like a small airport, what is it, Buckingham Airport, I believe, that was right down the road from that house. Well, we believe that part of the old airport where the old airstrip was actually went through where that house is and still is to this day. And sure enough, it was very much haunted. My room, coincidentally, had a little boy spirit. What at that time, it was around 12, 11 or 12, something like that. Let's see. Yeah, yeah, maybe between 10 and 12. And he liked to possess me. Now, being possessed is definitely something that is a very unique experience. And it was ever since I was possessed for the first time and it freaked my parents out that I always knew, man, I could see things. I mean, I would see orbs and I would see all kinds of crazy things in that house, but being possessed was one of the craziest experiences. Luckily, it hasn't happened since I've lived in that house because I've learned to put up a block. I've learned to, turn that off and be able to
Mhm.
keep them out. Ever since then. But being possessed, I'll have to try and describe it. The first time I was possessed, I was laying in bed. It was night. I was trying to go to sleep, and I felt my body almost separate from itself, and my head just started spinning on itself. Like I was moving back and forth, left and right, almost like I was heat exhaustion and I was going to pass out.
Mhm.
And from then, I just remember feeling out of body, and that was it. And then I would wake up. A few times I woke up in my parents' bed. A few times I woke up in my own. But I remember my dad and my mom telling me a story one of those nights that I had been possessed and I had went into their room, knocked on the door, they let me in and let me sleep between them. And I was breathing so loud that he actually had to yell my name to get me to stop. And they knew just from seeing me and when I laid down, it was not me. It was the boy spirit that was there. Now we found out about the two entities after we moved out, doing some research and stuff like that. Um, but it was absolutely insane. I don't actually tell many people that story.
Well, I can
So
see why, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. I mean, of all the things that I thought you were going to say tonight, that was not one of them. So
yeah, that
it
was
definitely
that was
surprised me.
honestly my first most traumatic experience of dealing with spirits.
Now, what do you know who the little boy was, or why he was there, or how he perished?
We just believe he died there and was connected to the grounds
Okay.
and just so happened to take a liking to me because on the other side of that coin, his mom was also there in the master bedroom and would also be seen by my parents.
Okay. All right. So both of them were there. It's
Now, we
incredible.
don't know why. Now,
Yep.
obviously, we never looked into any historical research, but that was the feeling we got, and that's what we stuck with.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that leads me to, where you and I met for the first time, at the Dunnellon Train Depot. We were there for a psychic fair, and I knew going in that it was very old. It was built in, I think it was 1908, and
Mhm.
that it had a lot of paranormal activity in it. I kept hearing, oh, it's the historic haunted Dunnellon Train Depot.
That was on
I know,
purpose.
what did you say?
That was on purpose.
That was on purpose, yeah. And
Yeah,
you have firsthand knowledge of it being haunted because you have investigated it, right?
twice. Yep.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the first time you went there. Obviously, you had heard that it might be haunted. That's why you went in the first place. But what was that first experience like for you?
I'll have to start at the beginning. My wife and I had been asked to join Citrus Paranormal with Andrew. And one of the first investigations we did actually was the Brooksville Train Depot, and the second one we did was the Dunnellon. Amy, the owner, had contacted him and was like, "Hey, we believe it's haunted. We never had a paranormal team here. Can you all come and investigate?" So we rallied the forces, and sure enough, only Andrew, the team leader, my wife, and I were the only ones who got to go from the team. And Amy and her husband had the board, historical board, I think, there with us,
Hmm.
and they stayed till what 9:30, and ended up leaving. Then the dare I say the actual investigation begun. There
Yeah.
was there was a lot of people in there for us to really catch anything. That's at least my belief. But after that, we were all sitting in the big room where we had the fair, and man, I tell you what, it was a really really interesting experience. Kind of recalling what actually happened in the order it had happened. Now, I might miss a few details. My memory is not the best, but so we started this investigation after they all left, and I just had this awkward feeling on the stage. Now, where Brian was set up was where we later learned where a little boy had died under that part of the stage. Now, in 1908, it was not a stage, it was a loading dock. That's the reason why the door on that side is the same height as the stage, whereas the door on the other side where you were set up was not. So
Right.
they made it a stage at some point, I think in the 70s, 80s. And they, like I said, it was originally a loading dock. The stairs are original and all that. So we were all sitting there, and I'm walking around with my EMF detector. Now, if you don't know what that is, it reads electromagnetic frequencies. It's like static electricity. It's what ghosts are said to be made up of. So when you think you feel a ghost, you feel a cold spot, you get the goosebumps. That's static electricity. That's what EMF detector reads. It reads in milligauss, and it reads temperature.
Hmm.
So I'm walking around the top of the stage, and where Brian was set up, where the little boy was said to have passed away under the stage, I started getting milligauss spikes right there, only right there. It was really weird. So I'm walking around. My wife goes, "Hmm, there's a lot going on here." And then Amy chimes in and goes, "Yeah, there's a boy said to be under the stage who died under the stage." Didn't tell us anything else.
Hmm.
So we start continuing on, and my wife, who carries protective crystals on her, she goes, "Do you want to play with some rocks? I have rocks." Amy pipes in and goes, "He really loves rocks. We leave rocks under the stage for him along with toy cars, and he stacks the rocks in a pyramid or something along those lines." We had no idea. It just popped up. It's crazy. So then we got on the topic of him for a little while. We start trying to see if we can see him, talk to him, all that fun stuff. Not a whole lot more. Well, maybe a couple hours later, we find ourselves back out in the front room, and we are sitting there talking about him. We start to try and guess his name. So we started going back and forth, and we did eventually settle on Timmy, or Timothy as his full name. And I used a little bit of my mediumship skills. I call it remote viewing to kind of view him. That I recall, I remember viewing him to have a leather coat on, short, dark hair. I think he was between 8 and 12, somewhere around in there. He wasn't very old at all, and he had a very, very strong connection with the owner, Amy. Like she told us a story that she was in the kitchen one time and she was washing something at the kitchen sink, and she turned around and boom, he's staring around the corner at her like, "What are you doing?" And it freaked her out.
I guess so.
Yeah, she's like, "I seen it with my own eyes. It made my heart jump." So, like I said, we are all standing in that room, and we started talking about him, and like it was almost like a flash. I'm getting information about him. I got the years. I believe it was between 1911, 1912, somewhere around in there, that he like this had happened, that he had died under there. And then I started getting, I believe it was December, January, when it was cold, because that's why he was wearing a jacket.
Hmm.
And we started to, further investigate. We all started pitching what we thought. And we eventually came to a conclusion that he had actually got forgotten about by his mom. She got on a train and left, and he hid under the stage to wait for her and eventually perished under, well, was the loading dock, now is the stage,
Right.
where he's said to be. That's where his energy resides. And, you know, all these years later, I think it was in the early 80s, Amy and her husband purchased the place, and she said that he's always been connected to her. She brought that back up at that time. And I was like, man, I believe it's because, you know, you really resemble his mom. It's the mom figure that he lacks, that he's sitting there waiting for. And she starts crying because she's really emotionally connected to him.
Right.
The reason it was so significant is Amy had actually lost a son in this life too.
Ah,
Now, there's context clues there,
yeah, two.
foreshadowing. Yeah, foreshadowing. So, um, at that moment, I knew what had to happen because of how connected he was to her. I was like, all right, come with me. I took her by the hand. We walked out to the big door that we had open during the fair. And I was like, all right, we need to, you know, you need to tell him it's time to move on. It's time to get on the train. Your mom's here and stuff like that. And we ended up going outside. And from that moment on, it felt like the entire weight lifted off the train station. He had found his mom and he moved on. At least that's what we believe. That's what I could see. That's what everybody felt. Well, after that night, it was a very intense night. I called my grandmother and I told her, and she goes, wait, you think that he's connected to her somehow? I was like, yeah. And she goes, huh, I believe that actually is his mom reincarnated in the next life. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense considering she ended up back with the place in this life, lost a son in this life, just like her last life.
Ah,
Now, what really tied it all together was when we very first came to the train station, to the Dunnellon train station, she greeted us. Andrew, you know, we all said hi. She showed me this picture of a cast on the stage after a play. And then they took a second picture of the same stage, and there's a full body apparition of a woman standing right over where the boy died on the
oh, wow.
stage. Now, we didn't know the significance until after, but we believe that picture is of Amy in her past life who came back to look for her son. Now, there's even more context clues in that. Well, I guess more foreshadowing, but there's a theory. It's called stone tape theory. It's when a traumatic event is, you know, traumatic in a past life that it absorbs the stuff around it, absorbs the energy of that, and it replays it. There's many cases of this. I've done a lot of research in it. I believe that the loading dock, now the stage at that time, absorbed the energy of her looking for her son, and it was recaptured on camera all these years later.
So it's the actual structure itself that kind of recorded this traumatic, oh my gosh, I
Hmm.
left my son behind, where is he? And then discovering his
Hmm.
body.
Hmm.
Wow.
That's my belief. Yeah.
That's some heavy stuff. I mean, traumatic, of course, as you said, but
Oh, very. Yeah. Very.
yeah. I'm wondering, and this may be something that Amy can answer because I plan to talk to her as well. But do we have an identity of this boy? Like, is there an old newspaper clipping or anything of who he was? Do we have a name other than your
Um,
intuition?
I've asked Amy about research, and she went, "Nope, I'm good."
Oh,
She
okay.
doesn't want to dig that up because it was. She said it was beyond traumatic for her because not only she lost her son in this life, she lost it in a past life too. And
Hmm.
she's like, "I don't want to dig it up," because I asked her at the fair actually. I was like, "Do we want to do research?" And she goes, "Nope."
No, I'm good.
I don't want to
Um,
go against her wishes unless she changes her mind. But this is all our intuition. It's all our speculation. But we're pretty confident. We all
right.
do agree that this is about what we think.
Well, and I like that you were talking about the EMF meters too, kind of going in conjunction with what you felt and saw, there in the
Hmm.
middle of the stage. I read a lot about the Dunnellon Train Depot on our way to the psychic fair and after being there for a day. And I read, of course, accounts of there's a little boy, there might be an unidentified older man who hangs out there. One of the psychics there that day said that there were a lot of spirits just hanging out. What
Hmm.
is your take on the building? Is it haunted by multiple spirits, just a couple? What do you think, or do you know?
So, because it's a train station, it saw a ton of people in
Right.
its time, even nowadays. Not as much come and going as it was back in the day, But for a 100-year-old train station, like I said, it's seen a lot. I believe that the place is 95% residual energy, come and go, because it's a big hub for spiritual energy. But I do believe a couple spirits do reside there. Little Timmy being one of them. And now that his spirit has actually moved on, he just comes back to visit Amy, his mom. And then the residual energy from the traumatic event, I believe, still resides there, because that you just can't rinse that away. You might be able to help it move on, but it doesn't completely go away. It was traumatic. I believe in the museum side, there is a man. Now, back in 1908, in those early years, the world was divided, segregation and stuff like that. I believe it is a man of color who was there and very angry because obviously back in the day, nobody was treated fairly. And he is stuck there. I don't know if he worked there. I'm not too sure, but it was on the colored side, which is the museum side. And to be honest, I'm not sure of any others. I haven't really tuned in on it, but I walked into the museum during the fair and I walked over there and I got dizzy immediately. I had to walk out.
Wow. And
Yeah.
it's interesting when we walked into it, just for context for everybody listening or watching this, you walk in and we uh like we're in this like entryway, and then to the right down a hallway was kind of where the fair was happening, and to the left was where the museum is, like you said, where it was, during segregation, where people of color could access the trains and tickets and things like that. Um, Somebody there that day told me, and I can't remember who it was, it may have been your grandmother actually, but said that people would not stay in that space very long. Like
Mhm.
the museum section. It's like they'd go in real quickly and then either rush out or were not interested, or something seemed to keep them from wanting to stay in there, which I found
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Um, the you said you went a second time to investigate the train depot. What brought
Hmm.
you back? If you had helped Timmy and if you had connected it to Amy, I mean, it sounds like the end of like an amazing TV show where everything's wrapped up nice and pretty.
And there's
What
always
what
a
took you
season
back?
two, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So we really wanted to go back to see what residual energy resided, along with any intellectual energy. Um, for the most part, the majority of the investigation was residual, the occasional EMF spike, and the occasional, chatter, EVP. Andrew would be the one to ask on that. A ton of orbs in the big room, a ton of orbs. He had a stationary camera set up everywhere. It was insane the amount of orbs. Now you can tell the difference of dust and orbs. Some of the orbs would fly, stop, completely turn around, go back up to the ceiling. Just it was insane. Obviously, none of us could see it. It was all night vision. It's in that spectrum. But yeah, we really wanted to go back just to see what it is. I mean, that's the thrill of ghost hunting. You can go back to the same location 10 times and have fun every time.
Right. Every
So,
experience is its own unique experience because you don't know what you're
mhm.
going to encounter. That night, actually, both of them. How long were you there? Because I know you said the first night the board and everybody hung out till about 9:30 or so, then kind of dispersed. Were you there the entire evening, like till morning, or was
So
it?
no, we would typically cut off investigations around 2. Our first time, I think we stayed till around 12:30 because after that whole traumatic experience, we all felt pretty enlightened and felt pretty satisfied. So we all went ahead and packed up and went home. The second investigation, we hung out, I believe, closer to 1. I don't recall exactly, but it really did die down. Nothing, to be honest, nothing ever really picked up
Mhm.
other than the residual energy. I mean, it was to me, it was as expected considering everything that had happened. But I mean, the one intellectual spirit that resides there, I believe still, he is very angry and doesn't want to talk. He doesn't like people in his space.
I
So,
see.
which is the museum. Yeah.
So his goal, it sounds like, is to let you know that he's there and that he doesn't want you there with him. Is that fair?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Because of
Yeah.
course my one of my questions for you was going to be, is there anything there that frightened you or made you uncomfortable? Because you sound very calm and matter of fact about everything. Did anything surprise you that night? Of course, the whole thing is surprising. I don't want to downplay that at all. But did anything catch you off guard, where you're like, "Oh, I've never seen that before. This is startling."
So the first investigation, yeah, it was about the whole night of that, learning about little Timmy and helping him move on. I had chills my the entire time of that whole thing of helping him move on, chills through my entire body because I knew my gut feeling, my intuition told me, you need to do this. We need to get this done. And we got it done. We were all shaken and chilly. Well, everyone except Amy's husband. He's more of a skeptic from what I've learned. Now, obviously, he owns a haunted train station. He does believe in something,
Right.
but he was
Right.
the only like, "What's going on, guys?" At least that's how I took it. He didn't really say much. We were in the front room. He was in the main room. I'm like, "You okay in there, man?" He goes, "I'm just chilling."
Mm. Just very relaxed about it all. I love
Oh
that.
yeah,
Well, it
yeah.
goes back to, everybody's different perspective on things and
Mhm.
how we may see something out of the corner of our eye, but oh, it's our imagination. We don't want to embrace that. So, I know a lot of people like that too, and I get it. I can understand that. Um, do you, I know that you said, and I can ask Andrew about this as well. Of course, there's other equipment, there's video, things like that. What would you say to somebody going to the Dunnellon Train Depot who may be going for an event, a concert, to investigate? What should they look for? Like I mean, you have some experience behind this. If somebody's investigating the place, like what tips would you share with them?
To be honest, I would tell them to follow their intuition, and just follow it, and it'll take you exactly where you need to be. The place is not very big, but it definitely has some stuff going on. Now obviously I could tell them the stories about under the train or under the stage or loading dock, and I could tell them about the museum. But to me, that kind of ruins the fun. It's fun to let them figure it out, have their own experience. It just furthers the proof that the paranormal does exist and spirits do exist. The other side does exist, and people find out about it every day.
Right, you get that confirmation when somebody else has a similar or the same experience you had. Uncovering that, it's like, see, I knew that was going to be there, but I wanted you to find it yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
The um how much do you know about the history of the train depot? Again, I know we talked about it opened, in 1908. I know it transported people and phosphate and, you know, farmed goods, do you know
Mhm.
anything else specific about the train depot, or is that more of an Amy question?
That's definitely an Amy question. I know you could mail a kid back then, but that was about it.
That's funny, and you're exactly right. And
Hmm.
Dunnellon is an interesting town in that it's was called Boomtown for a long time, still is referred to as Boomtown. Yet it's very rural now. Is the city itself have this kind of energy? Is it confined to the train depot, or do you know? Have you investigated any other parts of the city?
I haven't done any other parts of the city, but Dunnellon, personally, my opinion, I definitely believe is more on the spiritual side. For the size of the town, the actual town, and then the size of just the Dunnellon in general.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot going on there. From what I've heard before, that there is a haunted road with a like a school bus thing. Now, there's probably one of those, a story of those in every state, but I've heard that there is a road with haunted children that will push your car. Now, I've heard this in other states too, but I've heard that that was a thing, and I still have to look into it. But
Right. Well, that's what's so fascinating about this is, finding out the paranormal stuff versus what is lore and legend, and where
hmm
that came from, and trying to differentiate and making sure there's not a connection or there is a connection. Um,
hmm
where, transitioning a little bit away from the train depot, um, what are some of the other places that you've investigated, and does one place in particular stand out for you as surprising or the most haunted or the most intense experience?
Um, actually, not just for the sake of the podcast, but the places that I have investigated, so far here, the Nellen train station has been number one as
Okay.
far as the experience and what's going on. I've done the Brooksville. Now the May Stringer House was an experience. Now I've only done it once. I know that is one of the most haunted houses in America. Not downplaying it at all. The house was so fun to investigate. So much cool evidence. No, but I think I need to go back for a second time before I can truly gauge the experiences. We didn't end up staying the whole night. Um, my wife and I actually did leave a little early. It was an exhausting day into an exhausting night.
Hmm.
Um, but so far in the investigations I've done, I believe I've done the Brooksville Train Depot, I've done the Denellen twice, and I've done the May Stringer House.
Okay.
Um, since I've got into paranormal more since I've lived in Citrus County.
Right, right.
So
And
I'm
found a
gonna do
group to
more.
investigate with.
Hmm?
And you found a group to investigate with, which of course makes it better, I'm sure. You know, you go as a
Oh
group, as
yeah,
an individual. You
yeah.
talked about being exhausted, and I always am curious about this with psychics and mediums or people who investigate. After you spend time around all this energy, you know, seeing and sensing, does it kind of drain you a little bit? Do you need to go home and recharge, or does it do the reverse and energize you? Because I've heard both.
Um, in all honesty, I guess that does depend where you are, but in most cases, it drains you. Um, how do I put this? So when you're connected, just like reading in tarot and being connected to the other side, that is using your spiritual energy to become a medium between them and the person you're reading or what you're doing. Same with psychic mediums, they connect with the other side to talk to spirits. It's using your energy, and yeah, it does very much drain you. Now, there are cases like meditating or going to a healing sound session. Those you connect to the other side, but it charges you. I mean, there's both sides of the spectrum, but in most cases, like paranormal investigating, it drains you because you're connected, you're scared at times, there's thumps and it's pitch black and it freaks you out. So
Yeah, which is part of the fun, you know, that adrenaline rush. You know,
mhm.
it can be very addicting. And you know, I'm not a paranormal investigator. I'm a former journalist who likes to ask questions and to learn and you know share what I learn. And I can say, being in that train depot definitely had a unique feel. Like it was very cool from a historic standpoint because you know I'm like I look at a place and I go, oh, I can just picture what this was like 100 years ago and this is happening. But at the same time, it felt different than that. And it's hard to explain that exactly. Almost
Mhm.
like, okay, I see people here, but I feel like there's more here. It felt more crowded than it was, I guess is the way to phrase it. Um,
Yeah.
Surprised me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Now, there's one more cool thing I'd like to add about the depot. So after the whole thing, after the first investigation, and we did help him move on and everything, like I said, the whole weight off of the train station did like lift because I believe that that situation was probably the most traumatic to happen there. Now, there was definitely other traumatic things that happened there. I have other stories I can get into, but um, after that, I believe that, me, my wife, and I going there with Andrew, it just turned out to be the three of us. The rest of the team couldn't make it. I believe that was for a reason. Not downplaying anyone else on the team. I just don't believe it would have happened the same way had anyone else been there. Because at that point, I kind of had taken control of the situation and, helped him move on, make it happen, and all that fun stuff. But like I said, the whole weight lift off the place, and I believe it was because of that that we were actually able to do a psychic fair there and it be successful. I mean, we saw almost double the numbers we predicted at our first fair at that place. Now, this is not our first fair, Spirits Row, my grandparents and I, the company we've all created to do fairs and stuff. It's not our first fair. We've done 5 or 6 of them now. This is the first one in Citrus County, and we saw close to double the numbers. But I do believe had Amy not called Andrew and Andrew set up the investigation and us this all happening, that we would have never been able to do anything there like that. So I thought it was a really cool chain of events that it allowed us to do a fair there. And
Yeah.
even more to that, I ended up getting I didn't even think about it until after I sat down. I ended up getting set up right in front of the entrance, right below the steps where he had died and where I had helped him move on, where all the whole traumatic thing was. Now, oh boy, I had a migraine most of the day. I was like fending off the energy that it gave off so everyone else could have a good time. I felt like I was a gatekeeper to it because I helped him move on. And I just feel like I ended up there for a reason.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there are no coincidences. And, you know, it's a chain of events that leads to, you know, something great like that
mhm.
fair. That was fantastic. And I know we stayed busy the whole time. We were there talking about Phantom History House and our podcast and all the stuff we're doing. And such a warm group of people too that we were so welcomed into. So thank you for being a part of that and helping to create that. And for you know, using what you're able to do in so many different and unique ways, you know, whether it's tarot card reading, paranormal investigations, or beyond in the case of little Timmy. So amazing and very impressive. So thanks for all of that.
Oh yeah.
Before I let you go, one final question for you. And you may not have an answer for this, but it's just a little picked up on something that you said a little bit ago. You said, oh, there was probably some other traumatic stuff there too, outside of, Timmy. What kind of traumatic stuff do you mean? Did other people die there? Was it just traumatic because people were coming and going? What did you mean by that?
Um, the one thing in particular, my grandmother cued me in on after I helped little Timmy move on and everything. I believe, I kind of like took the topsoil off of the residual energy in that place, and more came up.
Hmm.
And after that, my grandparents and I went back to, talk about the fair, and we set our date that day. That was back in October or something like that. And we left, and she tells me, because I rode with them on the way back, she goes, I have this really bad feeling that someone hung themselves over the stage where little Timmy had died, right there at the stairs, hung themselves from the rafters. And then I got a picture of it, and I was like, man, I think you're right. That's what I mean. That she told me that. Now she is the master at visualization and remote viewing. Like if I see a picture of an entity on the other side, she'll complete it.
I
Or
see.
if she sees one, I'll add some details that she didn't see. We're really good at that together.
Right.
But man, did she see a huge picture, and I believe that she definitely seen something that did happen there.
Wow.
When, where, who, we don't know, but we seen it.
Right. Right.
So that's
Uh,
that's what I was referring to when I brought it up. Is that was the thing on my mind. I'm sure there's more, which I'm sure we'll take up in the future.
yeah, absolutely. Dig up, literally and figuratively, depending on how the investigation goes. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, Orion, for chatting with me about all this. I find it so fascinating, especially after I've been to a place that has this history and these connections to it. It kind of gives me a whole brand new appreciation for it. So I appreciate you talking to me and sharing your experiences and what it is that you do.
of
And
course.
I hope that we're able to connect again before too long, whether in person or another podcast. I'd love to talk to you more about what your experiences are and some of the great historic places that are in your future.
I'll be here. Don't
All
worry.
right, excellent. Thanks again. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching that. Remember, go to phantomhistory.com and sign up on the newsletter so you are alerted when we have a new podcast. And check out our new bed and breakfast at phantomhistoryhouse.com where you can book your stay and we can talk ghost stories in person in the library. See you then.
Hi, it's Tim and Steve.
Here are a few reasons to visit Phantom History House.